hit that record button. Oh, hello, everybody. I am going to ring a bell. And what that does is it just sets a tone to bring you into present time. And present time is something we can utilize for our centers and intuition. So whatever you've been doing today, just feel it drop away and breathe into your belly. Just a couple of breaths. Right into the center of your belly. So today's webinar is on something that is actually close to my heart, logic and intuition. And I say that because my advice on this comes from decades of trial and error, not only in maintaining a painting practice and losing center and coming back and not trusting intuition and then coming back, but also decades of teaching in academia, foundational courses of design, composition, color theory, painting, drawing, and then branching out and doing workshops. I think my first workshop, I won't say how many years ago, but a couple decades ago, on the alchemy of mixed media, and alchemy being internal as well as external, and then moving into workshops around the country, and then now at Mantecon Studio. So my foundation is really finding my way of balancing the balancing act of intuition and logic. So before we begin, so we can have this be interactive in some ways, and we will be doing question and answers at the end. But I want you to get a piece of paper and just so you have that, and a pen so you can jot down anything that I might say. We will have the chat box open for those questions at the end, and they might get lost if you do it here while I'm doing this talk and sharing for the next hour. And even, the more we engage, the more that you do write things down, the more you remember. And even if you take one thing away, then yay, I've done my job for the day. So I've had two very popular questions that come in my teaching practice. And one is, how do I distinguish my individual style? What sets me out above and beyond other creatives? And those that really live in that right brain, those that are just always intuition and process, they know this. And then the other is, how do I sustain a creative practice? And you can see on my YouTube videos, and it's also on my website at Mantecon Studio, 3 tips of sustaining a creative practice. So we have that one, and that can go to the left side of the brain of, how do I set up a schedule? How do I show up? How do I be in it every day? Not just when the spark hits me, so I can really hone in my techniques. So I want to start by really defining what I mean by logic and what I mean by intuition in an art practice. And I define logic as the ability to discern. It's the ability to hone in our craft. For instance, how do we read a painting? People say, okay, I need to know the compositional elements of reading a painting, like step by step. I've always said there are guidelines, but there aren't rules. We want to know those guidelines so we can break them, right? And the guidelines are really knowing the sum of its parts. It's a narration. And when I'm going to show some slides today and talk a bit about composition and how to get into that logical mind, but then step away and use the intuition, because really logic and intuition, we want to weave. We want to be able to have both, to hear the whispers and do the technique, and hear the whispers and do the technique. The other thing I'm defining logic with is repetition. Repetition, second nature, making something rote over and over and over again till we've mastered it. And then recognizing, where does my line, where does my shape, where's my imagination in a disciplined fashion that we can say logic. And then intuition I'm defining as really the ability with our ear on the ground of trusting our inner voice. And what gets in the way often is consensus. In fact, I'll talk about that in a little bit of my experience in graduate school of how developing my intuition got cut off at the knees. Like I swallowed everything whole and just was going by what consensus said. And it took me 10 years to find my voice really again. So it's about the ability to really listen and to collaborate with the self. And I will be doing at the end an exercise that we can all do together, because in wanting both, we want our gut. We want to be able to hear our gut in a meaningful way. And both are so important in communicating our highest visions. So before I get started further, I want to do a short exercise with you. And there's two ways we can do this. One is standing up, and the other one is sitting down. And really what this is doing is getting our neuropathways, because intuition has a lot to do with the somatics, our body, how our body responds to our environment. We want to be like the willow tree. We want to be grounded, but we want to be able to sway in the breeze and hear the messages. So this is how this goes. You can do this sitting down as well, but I'm going to show you standing up. Okay. So just bear with me. You are going to you're going to take one foot and cross it over an opposite hand. So it's just this. And what this does is it's like the circuits in our brain start weaving. So if you're sitting down, do a few of them. Because as you're listening to me doing this webinar, you will, if you're more left brain, maybe you get more in your right brain. If you're more right brain, maybe you get more in your left brain. Anyway, it looks silly, right? But hey, our uniqueness, our silliness, our quirkiness, the more we own that, the more we're in our authenticity. Actually, authenticity is not really a word I like to use so much anymore. It's more when we are really centered. This world is moving so fast, and I believe, we're being asked to think outside the box more and more. Not you all out here with me, because you're all creative or you wouldn't be here. But we can tip from one side to the other. When we are in our groove with the balance of both, then those quirkinesses in our compositions are actually just off the rails enough to be good. So how do we tip from one side to the other? Well, in our logic, I talked about consensus. Now it's off the charts. We compare ourselves with social media. We feel like we need to make work and post it right away so we can get responses. And I've talked about this for you all out there that are in my workshops and classes. I talk about, the best studio practice we can have is a closed studio door till we're really refining what 10 pieces do we want to put on our website and take forward. So that consensus, we need to be really careful. I mean, I've really noticed in my own practice over the last decade or so that I don't feel so good when I'm on social media too much. And it took a while to really listen to my gut, but I had to kind of back it off. You know, I come from the old era of alone in the studio and or collaborating with others, doing shows and seeing things in person at the gallery. So you can actually stand and take in a visceral experience of the person who made it, as opposed to a 10 by 10 image. And then what we're doing is we're making work. Our logical mind kicks in over to the other side too far. And it says, how can I make work? How can I curate my work that it will look good in a 10 by 10 square? I granted, you know, for some of you, that might be your way, but I'm just forewarning that it can hinder after a while and take away from the intuitive processes that we're all born with, that we want to hone in more. Another thing is when we get lost in the details of our work, and we're not standing back and looking, because that weave requires, it requires pulling up a chair and having a cup of tea with your work. Because if you listen and not dictate with your will, it will take you sometimes on a different journey that we least expected. I mean, we live in a culture that reveres that left brain, right? So we're working, our will is saying, this is what I need to do, and I'm going to make it work. And we have 10 steps to everything these days, 10 steps to an abstract painting with no mistakes. I mean, those mistakes are sometimes the epiphany of beautifulness. I don't know how else to say it. When we're not working formulas, you know, we string together all our techniques. Here's another left brain one. We take so many workshops, and now we're just stringing those techniques along, and the work is looking really slick and sometimes looking like our instructors as well. I personally teach, and what I've developed over those years of academia into workshops, into developing the whole individual human being, of what it is they want to say, not what I do in teaching them, although I have a plethora of techniques under my belt, but it's called structure and release. I give a little bit of technique, and then I ask you to stand back and forget it all and be like a child. And when your will or your fear steps in, we don't say, oh, back off. And I practice this, and I struggle with this in my own personal life, and whatever's showing up in your personal life will show up in your painting practice or art practice if you are working consistently. And that is fear. Like, it seems like it's just a canvas. Why are all my fears, and I'm afraid to make that mark, showing up? So the letting go part is I can say that over and over, and our logical mind can say, yeah, I get it. I got to let go. I got to let go. But it really is visceral. It really is just a little bit of a surrender and permission to make really bad art for a while. Seriously. I mean that, you know, it's risking being out of control. I don't want to be out of control, but I've noticed when I am out of control, and it happens every time with the body of work, it seems I might take them a little too far. Like, how do you know when a piece is done? That's an intuitive process. Not knowing when it's hungry anymore. And the more we're willing to be out of control, when it's time for a piece to be done, we actually can hear with our ear to the ground. So the other side of this, when you take intuition too far, is what I've noticed is not taking accountability for the work. The work just speaks for itself. I just make the work, and whatever you want to interpret, that is fine with me. You know, that does work for a process painter that is just doing it as your hobby, right? But a lot of you are on here because how do I move into professionalism? And if you do want to move into that professionalism, the work speaks for itself isn't really going to work. You need to discern. There's the logic that comes in, writing about your work, spending time with your work, listening to your work. What is it saying? What does it mean? It's not like telling the viewer. I see this also a lot in working with clients, mentoring with their art statements of, I hope that you get fill in the blank from the work I make. You don't want to tell people what to think, but you do want to discern what you are thinking, not the adjective of, I just work with intuition. Well, what do you mean by intuition? That's taking the balance back over to the logic. You know, when I went to graduate school, I was there during an era of the 1990s of minimalism and conceptualism. And I was working from a high state of emotionalism. I was in that side that I just described of my work speaks for itself. I'm just processing out what is going on in my life, trauma or this or that. And here it is, like regurgitating. And there were some powerful pieces. And I remember being in critiques, and I had one instructor, actually, she was my nemesis, but she did become a really gift for me as a teacher in the end, years later. One, she taught me how not to teach. And two, I remember I was crying in one of my critiques. And when I left, she's like, you can't do that. It makes you look ditzy. Don't do that. And I remember I was just devastated. And as the years went by, her ridicule, like putting me on the spot, or, another thing is not to talk about what I'm passionate about, which wasn't accepted when I was in graduate school. And that was my long-standing passion in life of the mystery of life, spiritualism and metaphysics. And when I talked about it, I didn't discern what I really meant. I was told I was woo-woo and that you really didn't want to present yourself in the world with the woo-woo in. So I backed way off. I lost myself for many years. I made very technical paintings. I mean, now I can talk about my work of this 10-year search of the connection between body and spirit. And now just slowly geometric shapes are starting to come into the works again, but I know they're mine. I know I'm searching, I'm always searching. In the work itself, I'm looking for where is in this maddening world, the logic of how we are grounded in geometric shapes. How are geometric shapes connected to a higher spiritualism, like the triangle or even the rectangle? And what does the square mean? The pyramid is stable, where if you have the square, it's not so stable. I mean, I'm exploring that, but I go off on a tangent. I didn't mean to do that, because for me, painting is maddening. It's the hardest thing I do. And it's also this push and pull of paint, a complete act of devotion. And in many ways, of all the years I do it, it is in that mystery. It is my way of, it's a meditation. So the singular genius, when we put all this weight on one genius, meaning you, and you are just coming it up all on your own with that left brain. I'm now going back to that right brain when you're working with spirits or guides, and it's called woo-woo. How do you bring it back to some intelligence of logic? Well, I do believe, because some of you might be religious, there's a God. Some of you might believe in deities. Some of you might pray to the earth herself, Gaia. But I will say we are not alone somewhere. I mean, I guess there's some atheists that we are all alone, but I think we might all be able to say in a consensus on this one, we connect to something. We connect to love. How do we love our paintings and nurture our paintings to the best of our ability? So here I go. I'm going to give you some tips. I'm going to give you some tips in the weave of keeping a healthy balance between that right and left brain. Look, I've got my notes. I don't do well with notes, but it's my second webinar, so I'm doing the notes. There's something different. I got to say, there's something different. When I do my recordings, you do a recording. When you know people are right there that haven't signed up for your class, there's something different. Okay, so everybody in one sense wants to take our emotionalism and move it to a place where that emotionalism is high art. And in order to do the high art, we need to, I talked about logic of repetition, practice. It's the 10,000 hours, putting in your 10,000 hours. If you want a professionalism, I am going to now do a PowerPoint. I'm going to show you some images. And I think I got it queued up. If not, you all get to visit my screen. We'll see how this goes. Okay, share my screen. Turn off your mic. I've got a rebar going there. Let's see. Okay. So I've got here balancing logic and intuition. So the first thing I want to say is I want to talk just briefly about one of my mentors from the Romanticism movement. That's Rudolph Steiner. Rudolph Steiner founded the Waldorf schools. And one thing that I really love about him is what he talks about with body, mind, and spirit. And he says that our high sensitivity, and most of us artists out there are empaths anyway, we have a high sensitivity. The sensitivity to our deeper selves is progressing. And what gets in the way of our intuition is too much attachment to minimalism. You know, fill in the blank there. Too much attachment to materialism. Should I say minimalism? Yeah. I meant materialism. Oh, there you go. Too much attachment to minimalism. That's what I did when I was in grad school. Materialism. Okay, fill in the blank there. Materialism could be what is comparing and contrasting. What is somebody else making? How can I have this body of work so I can just sell it? You know, there's nothing wrong with selling your work. There really isn't. But we're talking here about the balance of our intuition. And if we really want our intuition, we want to be making work that speaks from our soul. The quickest way Rudolph Steiner talks about of getting to our intuition is through nature. And I'm going to give you a short visualization at the end of how to reach our intuition in a way that you can practice. Not only, you know, I also have meditations that you can find on my YouTube channel, but really spending time and listening to nature. And the reason I'm showing this slide right here is the second thing he talks about. And that is the vibration of color. He was a fan of Goethe, and Goethe talked a lot about the frequency of color. And this can get us into our intuitive feelings quicker than almost anything. This particular slide is me on I did a couple of years ago, the 7 rays of color, which you can get the video. And the 7 rays of color each week, I would come on live with a group and I would set up a stage of this one's violet. And I would talk about the history of the color, and then I would get into a meditation, and then we talk about the spiritual properties of the color. And then I do a demo of how to use that violet and make colors. So the more you can get into your sensory perception when you put on a color, why'd you put on that color that day? Sometimes there's a reason. When we paint in a group, I'll see somebody wearing a color in my class, and they don't really realize it. It's just kind of unconscious. We're lodged in their subconscious, they start painting that color. And it could almost be like, that is something in that color that has a message. You know, red is always the beginning. It's our life force. Orange is waking up the senses. Yellow is our will. Green is our heart. Blue is our communication. Violet is our third eye. It is the intuition. I remember, well, violet's at the top of our head. I'm sorry, indigo. Indigo is getting into the intuition. After green, you're starting to open up those higher senses. And I can remember doing this class. And when I got to indigo, I was like, oh. When I was doing yellow, I was having like dreams of other people's energy, my will, everything like getting convoluted with a little green in there. And violet has that tint of red at the end where you are the conduit connecting to something higher. Look, I'm wearing my red and violet today. I've got the grounded and the spirit. I just saw that. So trust in our instincts can be flexed when we take time to see the cues every day. And so now I'm going to give you some tips on what you can do with your logic. I'm talking about the importance of color. And you all might say, hey, you know what? I made a color wheel in middle school, or I made a color wheel in college in that color theory class. I can't stress enough how many times you can make a new color wheel. You and your studio or kitchen table with the paints you have are going to make a different color wheel than the one you had using those preschool paints or your kids' paints. Now you're using golden paints, and you might have a red that's cad red medium that's different than a alizarin red. So the alizarin red has more blue in it. The cad red has more orange in it. And you can see that here on the wheel. This has more orange, this has more red, and then you mix your colors. And notice the middle tones. This is going into tints all the way to white. So it's adding a little bit of black. The other way to do this, if you want to get a more sophisticated, of course, is to add that opposite color. I think having a color wheel with whatever paints you're using, oils, watercolors, acrylics, and having them on your wall is going to take you far, because you can mix and get a tint or shade immediately, which takes me to the value chart. Whew. You know, both these images come from this book right here. It's called Hidden, The Elements of Color. It's a fabulous little book. When I taught color theory class, I would have they didn't like me, but you know, some of them thanked me later. I would have them actually make this color chart. So notice on the very left-hand side, it's black to white. And so each of these is getting into, like, for instance, where's the purest yellow? It's right here. It's also the highest saturation, vibrancy that you can find. So you find the pure color. Let's see, green, I think it's right here, because this one has just a little tint of white and this one has a little tint of black. So if you really want to get into it, there you go. The next thing you can do, notice this book. I took a picture of it yesterday. I've had this book since I was 18 years old. Hopefully, I think it's still in print. I didn't check. I think it is though. Hand to eye coordination. I'm not telling you all that you need those drawing chops to draw exactly what you see, but I will say it benefits you to have command of your hand and the gestures you make. If you really want to see somebody who commanded the scribble, Cy Twombly. I don't have an image of him because it just came to my mind now. C-Y Twombly, T-W-O-M-B-L-E-Y, Twombly. But in the Zen of seeing, this is the meditation. You're just doing eye-hand coordination, practicing it when you're having your cup of coffee or tea in the morning. And the more you do it every day, the more confidence you get. And then when you get that confidence, try your opposite hand. That gets your circuits going of the right and left brain as well. And then here's an oldie but a goodie. drawing on the right side of the brain. You might all say, oh yeah, I remember this book. Take a chair, turn it upside down, put it on the table. Because what happens cognitively is our brain, when we see a chair and we're going to draw that chair, and remember this is teaching drawing classes, people are starting to draw what they think the chair is supposed to be instead of drawing what they see. This is a wonderful example of the right-left brain shift. Okay, the other thing you can do, let's say you're working on a piece. This is a small piece of mine here in the studio, working out ideas with these layered geometric shapes. And you take your piece, and if you can, let's say you don't know what to do next. This really helps. A mirror where you see it behind you because it shifts your perception. And as my favorite poet says, Mark Nepo, you have, let's say, a rock, and you just turn it a quarter turn, and you've got a whole new universe. You look at this in the mirror, it takes almost the ego out of it. It takes the ego out of it, and what you're able to do is you're able to see it in an objective way. That's the logic. The intuition is take that piece and put it somewhere so it's the first thing you see when you wake up in the morning. And if you're really stuck sometimes, like I am, on a piece and I have a deadline or something, I'll put that piece and I will ask for a dream. Have you all ever done that? Ask for a dream and something comes to you? Or the simple thing is say to yourself, I need to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden you have an internal clock in you that wakes up. The other thing you can do is, in the logical fashion, is take a black and white picture. Then you all of a sudden are getting into composition. You're seeing where the values are. And value is one of those guidelines in the compositional elements of painting. You don't have to follow them. Similar shapes create order. Dissimilar shapes create chaos. You know, I'm going to take Jackson Pollock. He took chaos to the high extreme, that there was order in chaos. What happens is there's a gestalt. Our brain takes in information and it wants to create order. It sees an oval and it thinks head. And it's kind of going back to some of the premises on the right side of the brain. The other thing is when you have shapes that are kind of that you're moving around, and you can do this representationally as well as abstract, because if you think about it, a representational painting, turn it upside down, it's still made out of shapes, color, and value. So if you have shapes that are just kind of hanging out similar in size, it's going to start becoming blasé. But if you have one big shape, one small shape, or one big shape with something that's like throwing in a monkey wrench, then you've got a dichotomy. You're starting to create interest, you know, and then the trick of turning it. Notice how the narrative changes. Different story. You want to be able to listen. This is when you stop, stand back often, and listen to what the painting is telling you. This feels like gravity dropping, right? There's more going on the top, less on the bottom than this. This is a storyline of uprising. The other thing you can do that is a weave between logic and intuition is the body of work. If you take, this is really messy and chaotic, but you know, that's okay. If you take the same size, it can be 12 by 12, it can be 20 by 20, 16 by 16, which these are probably 18 by 16. And you just have 8 of them going at once. There's your order. There's your logic. And then notice how it's kind of all over the place. That's how I start. I'm a mixed media artist. I make my own gessos. I do my own mark making. I add collage. It's what works, what I've learned to trust in my ADD brain, you know, having more than one thing. Some of you out there might be extremely, I'm planning my painting out. I'm planning all 5 of them out. That's okay too. There is a way, you know, you can do an underpainting just to kind of get you going. What shape do you do over and over that you can say, this is mine? Here, this one has a little more order. I decided to use the joint compound, which you can see here, and this is the handmade gesso. All of these, you know, are in my Alchemy of Mixed Media videos you can buy, or my, I don't think it's Anything Goes. It will come to me in a moment. So here's a bigger one. So I'm starting, this is my start point, right? I'm doing something where all of them are kind of sharing the same thing. And then this is a picture of my studio. The reason I show this is I can take all kind of the ideas that I have going in my brain and put them like all together and see what the storyline is. And then I can kind of create groupings. What I've noticed, and I'll share this with you, is in the last year, I have not taken like 8 pieces, same size from start to finish, which I'm about to do. I have more of fits and starts. And that's because I didn't have a show this year somewhere where I could do that grouping of work. So some pieces, I will tell you this, end up in my closet for sometimes a year. And then I can pull them out and they might tell me what they need. Sometimes I can't hear that they're done, you know, because I'm too close to it. I've overworked so many paintings that I wish I would have stopped. I have put paintings away that I pulled out and I'm like, okay, this painting is no longer hungry. It's done. Or there's, okay, if I'm making a body of work here, and let's say I want this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces to talk together, then something needs to change in 1 or 2 of them. Our critical voice can be so damaging. And this is one reason I think I've overworked some paintings. The critical voice just, I don't know, sabotage, or there's just, you're so marred in it, that left brain, that you just keep going with it. It's like I'll see people in my classes, they do a little pink on a painting and they're like, oh, that looks good. And the next thing I know, I turn around, it's been half an hour and the whole thing is freaking pink. They've gone too far. So standing back often more than you want. It's almost like you have to stop yourself and go, okay, stand back. The other thing you can do, and it's not so much in this one, but what is essential? You know, taking away is just as subtractive is just as important as the additive. You know, whiting things out, getting back to what's essential, relaxing the eyes, squinting the eyes, taking that photograph, taking the painting to sleep with you. Okay. So what I'm going to show you here is a series of a painting that went along the journey of, let's say, 6 months, maybe longer. It did go in the closet for a while. And then that backwards walk of my studio is attached to where I live. So I can come and do the laundry and then take, you know, go cook my food, and I can see the work and I'm working it subconsciously, unconsciously. That's why if your studio is set up somewhere outside of your home, you might want to bring a piece in. a place where you can see it, not only just sleeping, but you know, where in your environment can you take your piece. Okay, and so here's how it started. And then, you know, a few months go by and it became this. And then it became this. For a while, I thought I saw a raven up here. I don't know, head, a bird. But, you know, after a while, I'm like, come on, Lauren. Nope, that's not real. I mean, I could take it that way, because I will say, I don't have it in here, but there have been 3 paintings consecutively where there seems to be like a phoenix rising, you know, and the storyline and the narration that's going on for me right now is grief. My dog passed. I'm wondering where he went. You know, I come into the studio and I don't think, I just let myself do. And sort of these flying birds come. But that's not where it ended up. It ended up really in grounding, kind of that geometric shape marrying spirit. So this was the end. Now, if you're a chaotic painter, I mean, and don't have that, this is what I do, or I want to change it up, and I want to move the painting around and play with the intuition. And sometimes when you're not sure what to do, I find the stripes work really well. I tape off. You can see the tape here. You can see the lines here in this one. There's a little bit of collage. I also, because I can get so disoriented, I bring in the structural line. That works for me. You know, everybody's different. You can find it in my blog posts, for instance. I did a Inside the Mind of an Artist. I sometimes do interviews with artists. And if you look at my interview with Krista Harris, for instance, she's a completely different kind of painter, but works with that intuition as well. And check that out. It's pretty interesting. So this was at the Santa Fe Art Institute, the studio that they gave me. You can kind of get an idea of messy studio. And then I just sort of ended here. I mean, that gestural line, it actually ended up going away. And here, when the work comes alive, it's because we've demonstrated our dedication. And the change of direction is our reward if we can get past disappointment of our will. Mark Nepo. Disappointment of our will. I invite you, what do you think he meant by that? Is it that we're so attached to our will that when we do surrender, that we actually have a grieving process within that? All right, everybody, this is where I am going to do, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to bring in questions, and then I'm going to do a meditation or a visualization with you of how to connect with nature, and something you can return again and again to really connect with your intuition, and a short little writing exercise. So let me just break here for a moment and take my stop screen share. And does anyone out there want to write in the recording and ask me a question? Hello, hello. And in the meantime, have your paper, and nobody has questions? Okay, take your paper and your pen, maybe drink a glass of water. Well, what I want to do is this meditation, visualization, and then we'll do a short writing exercise. And then I would like some of you to share what comes up for you. All right. So if you could put your feet on the ground. And once you get your feet on the ground, maybe take a deep breath in and gently close your eyes. Imagine at the base of your spine, a grounding cord. And visualize this grounding cord moving through the chair you're sitting in, into the floor, and all the way to the core of Mother Earth. And now I want you to imagine up above you a cord that comes through of white light, and it moves through the top of your head, down your shoulders, the base of your spine, into your belly. Imagine warm white light. Any tension you might feel, just feel it dissolving. So, if you were a tree, and here you are rooted, what kind of tree are you? Just, if you don't see it, feel it. Because some people are audio, some people really see visions, and some people are just sensory. You know, are you really grounded? How are you grounded? What are your roots doing? As you morph into this tree, what kind of tree are you? What's your trunk? Are you shallow? Are you deep? What time of the year is it? So what are your branches doing? Where are your branches reaching towards? Now, can you feel beyond the senses of the tree? If that tree could talk to you and it's a part of you, can you listen for a moment of what that tree might be saying to you? Just get out of your own way. It's a somatic experience. It's a visceral dance. Are your branches moving? Are you static? Is it summer, fall, winter, or spring? And now, when you're done, just gently wiggle your toes, your fingers, open your eyes, take in 4 or 5 things that are surrounding you to ground yourself. And with that piece of paper, I'm going to give you a few words, and you're just going to write the first word that comes to mind. Okay, here we go. Grounding. Season. Trunk. Tree. Branches. Okay. Now with those words, I'm giving you kind of a short version, but one way, you know, to really kind of tap in with what's going on to bring into a painting practice intuitively is you can get a bigger piece of paper. You can make a grid, or you can make I have people just make like however many words. I think I gave you 6, you can count them, whatever, 6 boxes. And then you look down on your word, and let's say your word is leaves. I could come in on, I say go. You could do leaves, abstract or representational, color green, doesn't matter. And what this does is it opens up a dialogue. with your intuitive self. You can also, I strongly am a fan of lucid dreaming. But one way, some of you don't dream, but there is a few things you can do. And one way to start getting yourself in there, and this is a practice in nature, somewhere in your environment, and it's really simple. You just stand up, you walk out your door, slowly walking and listening to the cues around you. There's a tree. The tree is rustling in the wind. How is it rustling in the wind? What might it be saying to you? I'll give you one example of how I once approached this exercise, which I think I got from Mark Nepo, from the River of Light, maybe. And I've now implemented it. I've now taken it, because he teaches writing, and used it in art instead. Implement. Yeah, that's a word. And that is, one time in my life, without realizing it, things just needed to go. Things needed to be discarded. And I'm doing the walk, and I'm listening to the cues. And all of a sudden I look to the right, and there's like, oh my God, who just discarded their trash on the side of the road? And like, who does that? Whoa. And I realized, taking time of what needs to be discarded with discernment. I'm like, oh, I get it. Now that's a message in life, but I could come back just as easily and go, what needs to be discarded and eliminated from all these paintings or this particular painting? So you can just write in the notes. I see one question, but just write in the notes, like, what image was the most potent, or what feeling? Just chat, just type it in. I won't call you out. I got this. Lauren, what is the best advice for not overworking a painting? You got to stand back more than you realize. You got to just stand back. And you've got to turn it, look at it, and what is it saying? What is it saying? I mean, I talked about how people will start with the pink and they'll use too much pink. So when you don't want to, stand back. When you don't want to, keep standing back. That's how I give you that. Okay. People, let's see, branches, willow tree branches, water falling to earth. Yeah, that willow tree is really, it's really about how can we be flexible in our painting practice. A willow tree, how can you be more flexible in your painting practice? If that means, let's use the dichotomy. If I'm overworking a painting and I all of a sudden had a vision of a willow tree, I would first ask myself, how is that willow tree grounded? And when it is moving, like in the wind, how is it moving? Is there a cue I can see of not how to overwork? Someone says reaching, reaching might be, okay, how can I take more of a risk? Stability and core. So you're stable, you have your core, you have, the beginnings of a painting. How do you do it start to finish? One of my words in relation to branches is flexible. Yeah, the flexible. Okay, so here is what I am going to say to you all at this point is, I have, for those of you that are on this call, that, well, I have a couple of things. One, I've got my Dive Deep program coming up, and that is an invitation, but it's also got an application process. If you are really wanting like an 8-month immersion, and then through that container of meeting once a month and coming and doing a live workshop with me, that might be the way to go. My Dive Deep program starts February this year. I also have my mentorship. I have 5 sessions with me. You can email me. I work with you individually. For those who are in Santa Fe, Wednesday open studio. But what I'm offering for those that are just on this call is I'm going to be doing a start to finish live Zoom class. And we have a discount for all of you that are here today. And within that discount, you get the full color series videos, which is 20 hours worth of stuff, technical and intuitive with color. And you also get Let's Talk Composition. So those, and that's like 13, 14 hours worth of content. And so it's going to be 12 hours. 12 hours, this will be open. And https://monteconstudio.com/events/start to finish. That's where you can sign up for that. And then it will just go back to regular price without the videos. What we'll do is we'll do 2 Tuesdays and we'll work together, and then we'll have time off for 2 weeks where you will be getting some short videos in between to keep the momentum going. And then we'll have 2 conclusions, how to do a painting from start to finish. So we get to work as a container. And if you feel that, if you want to work with me and not want to do that mentorship right now, right away, or you want to feel it out to see if dive deep is what you really want, this is a way to work with me if you don't live in Santa Fe. So there's my stop share on that. And with that said, let's see, what else do we have? Vibrating. Oh, that's good, Jeannie. That is good, Janine. When we vibrate, there's that color frequency. Think about this. How could you go to a color which seems to be vibrating? And can you be subtle while you're painting those colors? Even if like you did a color wheel or you chose one color and did the tints and shades, it's a great logical thing to do, to be able to get that on the wall and see which shade or tint vibrates differently. I wasn't able to come up with one tree. The words grounding, not brittle, winter, thin. Okay, Leah, it's so nice to hear from you. Hi. Wow. Okay. Grounded. Well, you are grounded. I know you as a dancer. I know that you ground, and not is the going through the transition of whatever is going on right now in life and not trusting that. That brittle and winter and thin just means it's the season of, I'm going to say grief, but it's also the season of just at that edge of transformation. Something's changing. And if you're doing this in your work, if you're painting or if you're writing or you're dancing, I'm going to say to you to really check in with yourself. Is this a time to make a big risk in the work itself? Maybe not in life, because when you're brittle and you're thin in the winter, something's breaking off. Something's being left behind. And there will be a point where you're going to be asked to make that risk. And it's sometimes safe to do that within our practice itself. Like a big gesture you might normally not do. Or really that fracturedness of brittleness in a painting or in the writing connected to the painting. Yeah. You're welcome. Anybody else want to write what they did? I did call you out, Kalia. I said I wasn't going to, but I know you. Kaylee, I would teach out at Sun Valley. No, Jackson Hole Art Center. And she's been to Santa Fe as well. Okay. I have time for another question. I'm here now before I ring the bell and say my good wills to you all. I'd love to do a start to finish, you know, with you. So if you can make it, if you can't, it will be recorded. So there will, and if you sign up in the next 12 hours, you still get those videos and you still get the recordings. I will be working with you from start to finish. Okay, I will be in touch. I want a little more follow-up. Okay. With the deepest gratitude. Hey, it's 1 o'clock on the dot. It was 1 hour. I'm going to ring the bell and we can all just take a deep breath together. Oh. I'm using a brush. With tremendous gratitude, I thank you all for listening to me today. I always love doing this. I always get nervous, but then I'm fine. Okay. Bye.